Шановні колеги, шановні журналісти, ми
Colleagues, we continue our working day. The topic of the briefing is the official statements after the terrorist attacks in Paris on 13 November, and I invite Madame Isabelle Dumont, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of France to Ukraine. Good afternoon, dear friends. From the very beginning, I would like to thank to the official leaders of Ukraine and to ordinary citizens for their support. I was impressed how many people came to the embassy during these days to express their support, and also I am very grateful for that security measures which immediately were applied by Ukrainian authorities that were implemented upon our request. I would like to remind you about the number of victims. As you know, on Friday, simultaneously in several locations in the city, a series of terrorist attacks was carried out. As of today, we have at least 189 killed people and some 352 wounded people. These terrible figures reflect the tragedies of real people, majority of whom are young people. There are colleagues whom we lost in the terrorist attacks. The investigation continues, and as of today, the 5 criminals are identified out of 7 criminals. Also, the families of terrorists were identified in France and Belgium. A couple of words about the measures taken by French leadership. The emergency situation was announced, and the emergency situation allows to impose limitations for movement of people, imposes prohibition on massive actions. It allows to carry out search, expropriation of arms, of weaponry, etc. The head of the state emphasized that the emergency situation, which is introduced for 12 days, then should be extended for 3 months, and in order to do this, special law should be passed by the parliament. The number of patrols, military patrols and police patrols was considerably increased in the streets. Jointly with neighboring countries, we strengthened control in the checkpoints, border points, in the airports, railroad terminals, etc. The 3-day mourning was announced in France. This is for the first time when we have such a long period of mourning. Today at noon we had the minute of silence in France. Here in Kiev, the French embassy also participated in this ceremony. Today, half an hour later, at 4 p.m. Kiev time, in Versailles, we will have joint session of both chambers of the French Parliament, both Senate and the National Assembly sitting. They will discuss the situation in the country with participation of the president. Yesterday there was a massive bombing of one of the military points in Syria, in Raqqa. As of now, the transport functions properly in France, and people can move on the streets. And now about international cooperation. We all realize that no country is able to fight with terrorists and to counteract terrorism alone. In order to counteract terrorism efficiently, we should establish very close cooperation between special services of many countries. On the European Union framework, we very closely cooperate with justice and law enforcement bodies of neighboring countries. In particular, this is true about Belgium, from which territory some suspects arrived to the French territory. Of course, our cooperation forms should be strengthened and improved. And Mr. Cazeneuve, Minister of the Interior in France, approached to the EU leaders to have a special review of anti-terrorist measures and strengthening of joint fighting. Specifically, he requested to exchange with information about passengers crossing the borders within Schengen zone, about the circulation of arms and weapons, and to exchange with information about sources of sources for terrorism funding. These days, Prime Minister Yatsenyuk and President Poroshenko attended the embassy and suggested their assistance in anti-terrorism work. We count for Ukraine very much, which will be temporary member of the UN Security Council during next year, and we count on Ukraine on developing this position and strengthening this anti-terrorist position. President Poroshenko has already made a statement about the strong anti-terrorist position of Ukraine. Thank you for your attention. Dear Madam Ambassador, thank you for coming. I will ask a question in Russian. Probably it will make it more understandable for you. In the context of this grief events, maybe France should change its attitude towards conflict in Donbass, because Ukraine keeps saying about terrorists acting in Donbass, and when Ukraine keeps saying this, Europe is some people in Europe are unable to understand this. Probably France will now change its attitude to Ukraine's statements. It is a slightly different topic. Today we're discussing the terrorist attacks which happened 2 days ago. As for Donbass, this is another issue. Probably, you know, the efforts and steps made by France during the last 18 months, you know, how much President Hollande and Laurent Fabius support Ukraine, how much energy they contribute to supporting the state sovereignty of Ukraine. I believe that we will continue these efforts, and we will continue to support Ukraine in this issue. Dear colleagues, any further questions? Unyan Svetlana Artemenko, I would like to specify France has closed the borders, whether Ukrainians can travel to France and whether the embassy will continue to grant visas to Ukrainians. Of course, yes, I expected to hear this question. Many people ask this question because of the strength and control at the borders. We had meetings with the heads of security service in Ukraine. Of course, people can go to France, but they may expect to pass through strengthened security measures. They may expect that they will be requested to come to the airport some hours earlier prior to their flights. Any further questions? One more specifying question on behalf of UCMC. How the tragedy in Paris will influence the big G20 conference in Paris, whether it will be held in Paris or not, or it will be relocated. Minister Narafabus mentioned clearly that the conference definitely will be held, but due to the attacks, additional security measures will be taken. This meeting of G20 is very important, and as far as I know, nobody cancelled participation, his or her participation in the conference, and everybody is going to attend this conference. There is another event related to Ukraine, which was scheduled for Wednesday, November 18th. It was scheduled in Paris, and yesterday we made official statement that we decided not to have this conference within these dates, and we decided to postpone this business forum to another dates. One more question on behalf of UCMC. Immediately after tragedy in Paris, the Russian leadership and some Russian mass media started to speak on necessity to unite the efforts of Russia and France for efficient fighting in Syria. This idea was reflected by Figaro newspaper. How do you think whether French foreign policy position will be changed in result of these events, and whether the closer partnership with Russia is possible? I am Ambassador of France to Ukraine. I am not the Ministry of the Foreign Affairs of France. What I can assure you about is that we will do everything possible to fight terrorism, and of course Russia has plays its role in anti-terrorist activities, but and as for Syria, I think we will continue fighting against terrorists in Syria too. Dear colleagues, since there are no further questions, we are very grateful to Madam Ambassador, and Ukrainian people support the French people, and we express our solidarity with you. Thank you.
Thank you.